Joel Embiid is no stranger to criticism, and in fact, the noise seems to be louder than ever when it does come to the former MVP. Charles Barkley is the latest name to get in the mix, recently discussing on the podcast P with Paul George that Joel Embiid's weight is an issue for his playing career and how it is negatively impacting the Sixers. I want to dive into specifically what was said from Sir Charles there, as well as break down what area this comes from. Was this something that Charles said out of love of him hoping to get better? Was this something that I think did cross the line? Why I do think Charles Barkley is more equipped to speak on this particular topic than just about anybody else in the planet. Now, before I dive fully into what was said, the quotes, and everything else, we're going to take a quick break to take a word from our sponsor. I'll be right back on the other side.
And while the Sixers have to put their hands together and pray that their star players can be healthy for the playoffs and give this team a chance, you are in control of preventing any crippling damage that could be occurring to your computer and other devices. The best way to do this is by utilizing NordVPN and clicking the link in the description to this video. Whether it is the risk of free public Wi-Fi, phishing scams, password attacks, ransomware, malware, or whatever next tactic is up hackers' sleeve, it is important to be one step ahead. A VPN stands for a virtual protective network, which masks your IP address and prevents anyone who shouldn't have access to your data from having it. But what's different about NordVPN is its trademarked Threat Protection Pro and advanced dark web monitoring. So whether you're a frequent user of your local coffee shop shady Wi-Fi, constantly getting emails that you can't tell are legit, or use the same password for every platform, NordVPN is the best way to make sure you're covered. With robust encryption, 24/7 customer support, and up to 10 devices being able to be protected under the same account, NordVPN is a full-service experience with the mission to make the internet a better place. So click the link below for access to an exclusive offer from us here at Sixers Digest for 4 months of additional services, along with Nord's risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee.
So to start with, I do think it is very cool that Paul George even had Charles Barkley on the podcast. He definitely seems to be running down that lane of Sixers allure. I'm sure we'll get Allen Iverson on there at some point. Wouldn't shock me if there's a Joel Embiid and Nick Nurse episode. He knows what he's doing as far as, the content standpoint there and endearing himself to Philadelphia fans. And for Charles Barkley, it was cool. He was Sir Charles. He was the guy that we know, the chuckster, the guy that is, can't miss television on TNT. He brought his own personality. He was incredibly complimentary of the Sixers summer overall, but he did have this critique for Joel Embiid specifically. And to dive into specifically what was said, he starts out saying that, quote, "I hope this is a wake-up. He has not played well. I'm hoping he's like, I need to get in better shape. You got to be a little bit embarrassed." And that was Charles Barkley talking to Paul George about Joel Embiid looking out of shape at the Olympics. And the extended quote that he continues on to say, he said, you know what? I got to get in better shape. I got to get healthy because if we don't win the championship or go deep in the playoffs, it's going to be because of me. And he keeps getting hurt, Barkley stated. And like I said, he's got to take some responsibility for that. Bring in you, Maxey's a stud, bring in all those other guys. If Joel don't do his thing, the Sixers are not going to win, Barkley added. And like I said, he has not played well in these Olympic Games at all. He continues to say, "I'm hoping somebody can get to him and say, yo man, you need to get in better shape. Because the way that you play in the NBA, when we were going up and down the court, pound inside. Number one, you can't win like that consistently in the NBA today, but also you got to be a little bit embarrassed at the way you played in the Olympics," Barkley concluded. So when I start by saying that I do think it's overblown, the Olympic storylines, I'm not judging Joel Embiid based on how he plays, and frankly, I think this has way more to do with the stylistic of basketball than anything with fitness. That I think it's Joel learning to be a little bit more of a low-usage player, playing next to guys like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, all these other star-studded names. I think it's more about him adjusting to the style of play of guys like that than anything to do with his fitness, but there's no doubt that he has not played his best basketball. And at the time of me recording this is shortly before their semifinal against Brazil, so who knows? He could end up having a monster game, and all of a sudden the tone is different across the world, as I do think the critiques have been a little bit harsher than Joel deserves, and overall I still think he's been a net positive for this team, particularly in the recent game in which he scored 15 points, led the team in plus-minus, all those type of things. The bottom line is, don't judge him fully, and we've seen the Joel Embiid experience, that he is a guy that, it takes a little bit to work himself in, that he's not a guy who can pick it up and put it down and look like his dominant self. He is a guy that, rounds into shape a little bit. And for Charles Barkley here, I do think this came from a place of love. I do think this is something that he genuinely wants Joel Embiid to get better, and I do think that this does hold a little bit of weight, no pun intended there. And to take a look at what Joel Embiid specifically looks like, this is what the latest we have of him at the Olympics here. there's no doubt that he's a little bit bigger than he was when he first came to the league. And take a direct look at his rookie year picture. We're going to take a peek at this one here. And then to take it back even further, you can take a look at him at Kansas, which you can see here. So to contrast that with what he looks nowadays, it is no doubt a little bit different there. Now, granted, I'm not going to say that I look the exact same as I did when I was 18 and 19 years old coming out of college, and Joel's obviously now 30 years old. That is a long time ago, and the part that I think is fair is there's no doubt that him losing a little bit of weight or getting down to as thin as possible, I think would be beneficial. That load, that amount of weight that his body is carrying on, it's not the easiest thing in the world, and we know the injury concerns that he has had. Now, in fairness, what I think he does not get enough attention or at least notice for is it's also not the healthiest thing for him to be doing, to be grinding his body into running suicides all day or sprinting up the court, because so often it is him like protecting himself for these same health reasons. That he just came off a playoff run in which he did have that knee injury. You think it's going to be great for him long term to be pushing through that and running and trying to get into shape. He's got to find these unique ways, some lower impact type things. There are those zero gravity treadmills, maybe getting on the bike, whatever it may be the case. Things like that you can have fair critiques if you want to talk about him dropping weight or staying in shape. But I do think that oftentimes doesn't get acknowledged enough. That like he's resting because that's what's best for his body, and ultimately that does end up with him being a little more out of shape than should be the case. And in general, Joel still does his thing. Like, this is a guy who's gotten better year in and year out from an actual basketball perspective. We're talking about him coming off a season in which he was averaging 34.7 points per game, 11 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.7 blocks, and 1.2 steals. Just absurd numbers there. Shot 38.8% from beyond the arc and 52.9% from the field overall. That is unreal statistics. Like a guy that literally was on pace for one of the best seasons of all time. And I understand that the reason that he didn't get there was because of these same injury concerns. So I hear Charles Barkley. And by the way, if anyone can acknowledge the weight conversation, it is Charles. That this is the same Charles Barkley who spent the day before draft night engorging himself in food, trying to scare the Sixers away from drafting him. We had this article writing that for a 48-hour period in 1984, Charles engaged in an eating binge in the hopes of dissuading the Philadelphia 76ers from selecting him in the draft. He began with 2 Denny's Grand Slam breakfasts, 6 pancakes and bacon, totaling around 1,660 calories, and a vanilla milkshake to wash it down. The lunch offerings, which have varied in decades worth of repeating tellings, included either Kentucky Fried Chicken, mashed potatoes and coleslaw, half of the menu at Red Lobster, 2 McDonald's fish fillets, a large fries and a Diet Coke, or 2 Texas-sized barbecue sandwiches. The dinner menu at the steakhouse including a T-bone, baked potato, and of course, 3 desserts. Charles repeated it all the next day, gorging as he described, quote, everything I could get to my face, everything that wasn't nailed down or poison. During a night of heavy drinking with his agent, the sight of Charles crushing beers might have made people think that the prohibition was about to be reinstated, he stated. So, funny story there about Charles. He is a guy that's been kind of open. And when he came into the league, we know the round mound of rebound, the guy that carried a little more weight than you would expect from a top-tier athlete. And he didn't really take that next ascension to superstardom, which he eventually reached, until he did start taking his body seriously. So I do think Charles understands the situation that Joel's in. I obviously think it is slightly different circumstances because there's the injury factor in Joel that I don't think Charles can quite relate to the same extent, at least. So not quite an eye-for-eye comparison, but I do think this comes from a place where he realized his career didn't truly take off until he started taking his body seriously, and I think in Charles' eyes, he has not seen that commitment from Joel. Now, we don't know if that is truly the case. We heard all the horror stories when he first came to the league about him smashing Shirley Temples or him eating a burger on the trainer's table right underneath the basket. All that type of stuff has been way quieter, so it wouldn't surprise me if this is something that Joel has zeroed in on. He does tend to keep out of the public light a little bit more than, I would say, the general athlete, particularly when it does pertain to that type of stuff and things with his health. So who knows what is going down behind the scenes. But Charles is also fair in the extent that this falls on Joel Embiid's shoulders. That as much as there have been the constant critiques about roster construction, about different coaching situations, about the second tier star not being capable of carrying the weight, this is the year where those excuses are gone. That it does come down to Joel Embiid showing up when it matters most. And I do think, like, to his credit, he had a very good playoffs last year. I get it's just 6 games. I get he was fighting through things. But he was the best player on the court from start to finish in that series. Miss me with the Jalen Brunson conversation because I don't forget about game 1 and 2 in that series. Embiid brought it on the defensive end. He still carried himself, still averaged over 35 points per game. Still was a guy that was a dominant force on both ends of the floor. That with half a face and 1 knee there. If he can enter a playoff run, and I know it's going to take a little bit of luck here, and the odds are certainly not in our favor of it happening, But if we have one healthy Joel Embiid playoff run, I do think the perception of him as a player will be drastically different because he is a guy who can carry this team in the long haul, and I cannot wait to see that happen. So send some prayers that the fates can break in the Sixers' direction for that. I do hope that Joel does hear the message from Charles Barkley and does not take it the wrong way, and we will see what kind of shape that he ends up showing up to training camp when it really does matter. Once again, I'm not worried about the Olympics. I don't think it's as much of a fitness thing as people are making out to be. I do think it has more to do with the style of basketball. But regardless, I do think it's cool to see him out here representing the country. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning into this video here. Make sure you're dropping your thoughts below. I do want to hear from you guys on the Charles Barkley conversation. Do you think that's a fair critique from Sir Charles? Do you think this is something that is overblown? Also, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button and dropping a like if you have not already. And I'll be talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.